You tell yourself you're waiting for the right quarter. You're not. You're waiting because some part of you already knows what a no would confirm. And here's the part you really don't say out loud, not even to yourself. You're also waiting because you're not sure you want to find out what happens after the yes. If you've been sitting on a conversation about advancement for longer than you'd admit in a performance review or an advancement discussion or career strategy session, stay with me. I'm going to walk you through exactly what's underneath that weight because it's not what you think it is. Here's the version that sounds the most professional and the one you've probably told yourself more than once. If I keep delivering at this level, advancement will come automatically. The results are visible. The case is airtight. Asking would almost be redundant. So you keep working. You keep over delivering. You tell yourself the work will speak for itself. I told myself that exact story for years. And here's what I didn't see at the time. The longer you've been good, the more dangerous the ask starts to feel. Because at a certain point, you've been so reliable for so long that naming what you've earned doesn't feel like a request anymore. It feels like a demand. And demands feel dangerous when you've spent your whole career being the safe, reliable choice. So the case sits there, airtight, untouched, and the ask never comes. That's the story on the surface. It's not the real one. Underneath the professional story is the one you'll actually admit to. Maybe. You're afraid of the no, not the disappointment of it, the confirmation it would carry. Because if you ask and the answer is no, that no doesn't stay contained to the conversation. It starts to feel like it's telling you something about your worth, your readiness, whether you've actually been as capable as your results suggest, or whether you've just been good at looking that way. You've been managing a low grade question about that for a while now, and getting a direct answer to it feels like a risk you can't fully absorb. So you stay in deferral because as long as the conversation hasn't happened, the possibility of a clean yes is still intact. The deferral isn't laziness. It isn't lack of ambition. It's protection. It's the version of you that's been managing risk your entire career. Managing this risk too. That's real. That's the fear most people will probably admit to. Eventually, if you ask them directly enough. It's not the whole fear. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud, even to themselves. You're also afraid of the yes. A bigger title means more visibility in exactly the environment you've already learned not to fully trust. More politics, more exposure to whatever leadership comes in next and reassesses everything you've built. More performance overhead stacked on top of what you're already carrying at full capacity. And somewhere in there is a question you're really not supposed to ask out loud. Are you sure you actually want what's waiting on the other side of that conversation? Because admitting that feels like admitting a failure of ambition you're not allowed to have. You're supposed to want the title, the new position, to continue to climb up the ladder. You're supposed to want more. So if some part of you genuinely doesn't, you bury that fast before you've even let yourself look at it. So the deferral ends up doing double duty. It's protecting you from the no, and it's protecting you from the exposure that would come with the yes. That's the version of this that almost never gets said out loud in a leadership context. And it's the one actually running the show. I want to be honest about something because the clean version of this story would end with me finally having the conversation and getting the seat. That's not what happened. What happened is I named the fear of the yes for what it actually was. And once I could see it clearly, I made an actual choice instead of an avoidant one. I was the sole caretaker for my elderly mother. I was raising my son as a single parent. I didn't have the bandwidth to take on what a bigger title and role would have required. And pretending otherwise would have cost me more than the title was worth. So I stayed where I was, consciously, on purpose, for reasons that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the actual shape of my life at that time. That distinction matters more than any outcome. Staying because you're afraid of what the conversation will reveal is not the same as staying because you looked clearly at your life and decided this isn't the right season. One keeps you stuck without your consent. The other is a decision you can actually stand behind. The conversation doesn't always end with you taking the next title or role. Sometimes it ends with you choosing, with full information, to stay exactly where you are. What changes isn't necessarily your position. What changes is whether you're the one making the choice. And here's the thing, the deferral never tells you. It doesn't actually protect you from what you're afraid of. The reorganization doesn't ask whether you requested the promotion before it redraws the org chart. New leadership coming in with their own people don't check your history of staying quiet before they decide who stays. What the deferral guarantees is this. When the next restructure comes, you'll be exactly where you are right now, having spent another year managing a fear you've never named, instead of making a decision you could actually stand behind. You're not waiting for the right quarter. You're waiting for permission to find out what's true. That permission was never going to come from outside of you. So here's one question, not a framework, just one question. And I want you to actually sit with it before your next advancement or career strategy discussion. When you picture the conversation going well, when you picture hearing a yes, what's the very first feeling that shows up? Not the second feeling, not the one you'd say out loud, the first one, before you've had a chance to edit it. If the honest answer is relief, that's one thing. If the honest answer is something closer to dread, that's an entirely different thing. And it's worth knowing which one is true before you walk into that room. If what you just heard landed somewhere specific, that's worth paying attention to. Not because something's wrong with you, because something in that pattern has been running quietly for a while, and you've just had language for it for the first time. If you want to see exactly what that pattern has been costing you, I built something for this. It's called the SoulFIRE Leadership Audit. It's not a personality quiz. It's a diagnostic across 6 dimensions built on real institutional experience that surfaces what actually has been consuming your capacity to lead, make decisions, and advance. The kind of thing that never shows up on a performance review. And if this is the first time you're hearing how I think about leadership, the full framework behind everything in this video is in my book, SoulFIRE Leadership, the leadership model women were never taught. You can find both links to the SoulFIRE Leadership Audit and the SoulFIRE Leadership book in the description below. Welcome to SoulFIRE Leadership, where we talk about what it actually feels like to lead at a senior level. The parts you're navigating alone because nobody in your environment is probably naming them. Please remember to like this video as it helps to make it visible to others who need to hear this. And if this is the kind of conversation you want more of, please subscribe. I post every Wednesday. I'll see you next week.